Welcome to this week's edition of Two Men in the Middle, where two men in the Midwest pontificate about news, politics, pop culture, and current events. I am Brandon Kinnig.
I'm Craig Huey.
Craig, let's get started with the bombshell that happened Monday. Again, this is one of those weeks where it felt like a eternity, but if you go all the way back to Monday, which feels like months ago, Monday started off with a bang with the news that Tucker Carlson was being fired by Fox News.
You know, when I first heard that, I kind of thought it was a joke. I thought, somebody was just falling for a deep fake. I didn't think there was any possible way that Tucker Carlson could get fired. So it took a second to kind of realize this was actually happening. And I didn't really believe it until I saw the gal who does the middays, Harris Faulkner, do it on Fox and actually come out and address that, yes, Tucker Carlson had been fired. Did you think this was real when you first heard it?
No, I think I first heard it via Twitter, and so I did not believe it. I had to fact check it in a couple of different places, and it was still surreal because it just was not, I think, a moment that any of us saw coming. I mean, he was their top-rated cable host with the most viewers, pulling in 3 million nightly viewers, and top talent. So it's just, there was no indication that was going to happen. But it's interesting, as of today, everybody's still arguing about what led to that. What is the factor or factors? And there seem to be several different things that could have contributed. And at the end of the day, we have to realize that this is a corporation run by the Murdoch family, and they call the shots. And at the end of the day, if they are tired with somebody or find that they are too distracting or causing too much heartache, or feel that they're going to be too much of a liability in the future, then that's they're going to pull the plug. And I feel like that's what happened with Tucker. It was the accumulation of many different things that have happened. Not least of which, obviously, I think the recent settlement played into that with the fact that if you look at Tucker's on-air content, I mean, it became more and more extreme and fringe to the point, too, where some of these specials that he was airing, like the January 6th special, where he just
absolutely
created a whole new storyline about the protesters being peaceful, or the paranoia special about conservatives in America under attack, or the one about men having to tan their testicles. Like, you have all of these, like, these were not newsworthy. In fact, they were contradicted by the news division. News division refused to air them, or give credence to them. So I think you have to also factor that in as well, and Murdoch is 92 now. Like he doesn't give a fuck at this point.
He can't.
Yeah.
So I'm always a follow the money guy when any of this stuff happens, and my first inclination was there is no way Fox would have fired Tucker Carlson because he was their cash cow. And I've been involved with running some companies on a small scale, and everybody has a category of employees that are just unmanageable. Coming from tech, we're all aware of the senior dev or somebody that's been there for 10 years, only person that knows the code, plays by their own set of rules. And as a manager, you just put them in that unmanaged category. You try to get as much out of them as you can, minimize their damage in the organization, and roll forward. And I thought that's where Tucker Carlson was firmly placed, and he generated so much money for Fox that he could not be touched. After doing some digging around, that assumption may be completely false. And it has to do with a couple of things. One, cable news as a business has just deteriorated so much over the last 10 years that if you're going to pay your host $25 or $30 million a year, it's going to be very difficult to make money on that individual show with that host. And as we dig into this, a couple of things with Tucker's show, just from a financial side. Number one, they weren't dealing with real blue chip advertisers. Ever since 2020, their advertising base had deteriorated for the Tucker Carlson show, to MyPillow and what they call action ads. These are 1-800 numbers to call. Mm-hmm. These are websites to visit. If you've ever watched the Fox Opinion, it's a lot of, hey, old people buy gold.
That's just what I was going to say. The buy gold, there's a lot investment security.
Yes, there's a lot of commercials branded with battleships in them. I mean, it's not extremely subtle what they're doing. But Tucker, I think, got himself in this conundrum where I hear highest rated cable opinion show out there with 3 million viewers a year. I instantly equate that to he must be bringing in tens of millions of dollars in profit off of that show for the Fox corporation. Digging down through this a little bit, a lot of his advertisers had left. The advertisers that were there were people that were not paying premium dollars for their advertising. So Tucker Carlson's show may not have been producing the amount of revenue that I certainly thought kind of put him in this category where he was untouchable at the network.
Right. And that's a good point. And I think that often gets overlooked, or has, in a lot of the media narratives about this. And then you add on the fact that there's this outstanding lawsuit by this Abby Grossberg.
Booker / producer, whatever they call her.
Claims a hostile work environment, toxic comments that were said, which Fox has access to all of this because they apparently kept an Oppo file on all of their top hosts. Again, reminding them who pulls the strings, right? So a lot of these hosts think that, they are, the personalities and that they kind of wield the power, when in reality they don't. And Fox likes to remind them, the corporate side of who actually runs things. So you had that from a liability angle, and what else was out there. And then also just the fact that he was disparaging Fox News execs in some of these text message conversations.
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, they don't like that. And I think there's been a recognition for a long time that Tucker had this attitude that he was untouchable, and so there was a cockiness, element of it.
So Tucker pulls in about 3 million viewers a night, and they did this almost 6 years ago to the week with Bill O'Reilly when they fired Bill O'Reilly, who had the number one opinion show. Bill O'Reilly was bringing in about 3.7, 3.8 million viewers a night. So right off the bat, in 6 years, the highest rated opinion show already is down almost 1 million people in audience. That just shows how cable news in general has shrunk in general. And this week, BuzzFeed News stopped operating. Vice got gutted.
Yeah.
Nate, the guy, his last name just flew out of my head. 538.
Oh yeah, Nate Cohn.
No, why can't we think? We'll come with his name. He ABC let him go and basically ended the whole operation of them polls and political. The whole political side got shut down with
Nate
ABC.
Silver.
Nate Silver. Thank you. So there's a lot happening with cable news right now, especially about making it profitable. And where Tucker's interesting is he built the large audience, but in the process of what he had to do to build it, the content he had to put out, the people he had to put on, he basically made himself toxic to all high-end advertisers. If you watch Fox News, Ford, Toyota, AT&T, IBM, these are not the people that advertise on those opinion shows.
Right.
They just don't see them as viable for the audience that they're trying to attract. So one of the things Fox News could have said is, well, shit, we've got the highest rated guy on TV in that slot. To get there, we've had to make all types of compromises as a company, as a management team, to let this dude run free and put on the people that after 2018, 2019, a hard turn to the right, he's putting on people that nobody else, even on Fox, will put on. So we put up with all of that. We swallow all that, the fact that the guy's an absolute a-hole. We choke all of that down only to be, at the end of the day, realize we're not really making any money off of this. And I think that was definitely one of the pillars that drove that decision. If Fox News was making hundreds of millions or tens of $millions in profit directly off of that show, things might have been different.
Right.
Fox News is definitely making money off of Tucker Carlson being an employee. In the Fox News Nation subscriptions and other things, he has other value outside of that show. But one of the things I think started becoming very clear with the changing landscape of cable news network, they weren't gonna the Tucker Carlson Tonight Show was never going to be a money printing press for Fox.
No. There was a quote from Rupert Murdoch that came out in the depositions of the Dominion hearings, which I think, and this is paraphrasing, was along the lines of, "We're not red, we're not blue, we're green."
Yes,
meaning it's all about money at the
Absolutely.
end of the day.
The other thing, too, is I've heard this a lot, that Tucker Carlson was not part of the New York operation. He was based out of Maine.
He actually
and
set
out
up
of
his
Florida.
own
Oh yeah,
studio in Maine because he has a big compound up there.
Yep.
So he has a large estate in Florida, in South Florida, and then
Yep.
one in Maine. Which it kind of begged the question. I wonder, are Fox News execs going to clear his main studio out? Like,
Well,
how's that going to work?
I'm assuming all that equipment has a big Fox sticker on
Right,
it. and
so they're gonna
someone's
have
gonna
to
go collect
send
it at
people
some
to collect
point.
it, yeah.
Unless he specifically negotiated for when I leave, I take all this equipment with me, which that would be kind of odd to do. But,
Yeah, I can't imagine
But
that.
from listening to Brian Stelter gave a really good podcast with Charlie Sykes the other
Yes,
day.
I listened to that.
And he
yeah.
basically said Fox News has developed three pillars. There's the news organization, the opinion organization, and then there was Tucker. And Tucker had positioned himself completely separate from everybody else in the opinion organization. He wasn't on site with them. He didn't go to the same meetings, use the same producers. He was a completely separate entity within Fox, and he acted like it.
I was going to say, even on his show, he positioned himself as outside of the
Yes.
Fox network and programming to a degree that he would often say, like, I am not part of this media establishment.
Correct.
I'm going to tell
He's
you the
something
truth,
else.
regardless of what you hear on other
Yeah.
shows. And he was at times even highly critical of the actual journalist on the network with
Yeah.
him, sometimes very much in a public manner, as well as some of the other hosts. So he did set himself apart from the rest of the Fox universe, which you don't do. There's a reason. People like Hannity and some of the others are very political, but they're not independent. They're also very corporate minded.
Yeah.
Like they follow what the boss says. They do follow the corporate line, and they don't step out of place. Tucker steps out of place frequently.
Well, and he set himself apart. So when they started sniffing around saying maybe we don't need this guy, what that does is you have no friends, you have no allies.
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson really didn't have anybody in New York kind of telling his story for him or explaining why it was important. I guess maybe that he was still there or these things could be overcome or whatever that led to them dismissing him. So he had kind of positioned himself, like you said, completely away from Fox management. He didn't really interact with Fox News, the news channel, very much, those folks. And I think the best evidence of this is his January 6th programming, which the rest of his own network completely ignored. The news people didn't pick it up. They didn't run it. The opinion people didn't pick it up. He was a man on an island. That, to me, is a really good indicator of how isolated he had become at Fox.
Very, very isolated. He was also very vocal in criticizing his own network when they made the call of Arizona for Biden in the 2020 election, which, again, was that very controversial call at the time that became part of the Dominion case. But I think, again, that adds into just that criticism that all became public of his own network and the people he worked with, and that constant criticism. Again, it takes its toll. And if you're not going to be a company man or woman, you're not going to survive very long at Fox.
And then there's just his general personality. I think Tucker Carlson rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. It's been reported many, many times he has an extremely foul mouth. He's just very crass and very coarse in his presentation.
Yeah, and that's all in text messages,
Sure.
apparently, that Top Brass has.
There's having a foul mouth, there's being coarse, and then there's going around calling your female boss a word that
C word.
I'm not going to say.
Right.
And doing it over and over and over again. At some point, you pass the point of where things can be salvaged. And if you're doing that, if you're putting those types of communications in either text or email, some way where they're going to be preserved, to me, that just shows you've crossed the line where I truly don't give a shit about any of these people around me.
You think you're invincible. Yeah.
They're all here to serve me. I'll do whatever I want. It is what it is. And he just worked himself to the spot where he never thought this would happen.
There's a photo of him, I think it was from last year when the New York Times did a profile piece on how he has become this lightning rod for extreme far alt-right voices, and he's holding the front page of that paper with this like grin on his face, like he's very giddy about it. Like he leans into that element, and again, it just adds to that public display that he doesn't care. Like he built this persona, acted like he could get away with whatever he wanted, and I think we've talked about this, but I think it's accumulation of all of these different things that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It wasn't just one of those isolated. All of this came to a head. You have the settlement, all of this, and you look at, if you're looking at the future, if you're Murdoch looking at the future, you're like, there's going to be liability down the line with this guy.
Absolutely.
How much do we want to risk? Do we want to take on? And they decided it wasn't worth it.
And I think that's the big question. How does this impact Fox moving forward? I think there's a common perception out there that this is Fox's tacking back to the center. Yeah. This is them realizing that, hey, since 2020, things have gone too far. We've opened ourselves up to way too much liability. The Dominion settlement kind of drove that home, and it's time to get back to more just center-right news. I think this is also a recognition on Fox. Hey, we are not going to be a money printing press on some of these opinion shows. The cable news landscape has changed. The audience is too small. The advertisers aren't there. There is no show like Bill O'Reilly anymore that for 15 years dominated cable news network.
It's a different time and era.
And just printed money hand over fist. That's just not there.
I am skeptical of the premise, so that they're trying to tack back center right. And I think there's probably elements there that want to do that. But whether or not that'll happen, I don't see that. And I think partially because a lot of their more pragmatic, fair-minded people have left the network. I mean, people like Shepard Smith and Chris Wallace.
They're gone.
I mean, they bled all of those people over the past 5 to 8 years. So they have very little to start with. So again, it'll be interesting to see who they bring in and what new voices, because that'll tell the story. And it may just simply be that they're not going to give as much voice to the extreme fringe. Like you said, Tucker's show was the one place that Marjorie Taylor Greene could get booking.
Absolutely.
Charlie Kirk could get booking.
100%.
And without him, these people, like you said, don't have access.
Yeah. And these people are lunatics.
Yeah.
I mean, I went extra leaned into some of the fringe right, your Tim Pool, your Charlie Kirk, Jason Whitlock, folks like that, folks that their only, or one of their only avenues to mainstream was Tucker Carlson. And they are defending him in a way that, Brandon, you would think the First Amendment got overturned. What's been fascinating about listening to these folks, and to me, it kind of lets you know that they're in on the grift. There hasn't been a single word or sentence of discussion about what did Tucker do to contribute to him being let go. I mean, these are issues that are simply not going to be talked about. Brandon, you would honestly think by listening to those folks this week that the United States military rolled out, captured Tucker Carlson, stripped away his First Amendment rights, and he's currently sitting in jail right now. It's just...
It's that victimhood mentality,
how
right?
They
There's never
see
any
him
responsibility
is so different.
or accountability. Like, I mean, he's the victim. And it is pretty shocking. It's just, yeah, I mean, it's what I expected, but at the same time, it's still over the top, so over the top.
And I guess this is the theme of all kind of, I'm just going to call it right-wing media right now. It's, Brandon, I don't have special experience. I don't have a background in what I'm talking about, but I have a special perception and knowledge that only I have that gives me insights to these issues that, Brandon, you couldn't come up with. And it's because, they're very unique and very original. And people literally think of Tucker Carlson as one of the most original political thinkers in our time. Tucker Carlson uses minute-by-minute ratings to identify what words, phrases, and stories get the most reaction out of his audience, which very quickly he found those were stories about crime, especially crime by black folks, white supremacy, election denial, all that stuff. He found scientific evidence that there was a peak in the audience when he went that direction, so he just used that data to lean into the areas that grow his audience. Yeah. I mean, it's cynical, but it's also pretty straightforward.
Tucker Carlson made a intentional, I should say, pivot to where he is as this provocateur entertainment space. Because, at one point he used to be on Crossfire, opposite of what's his name? Novak, who's deceased, the conservative. He used to be on the same side against Paul Begala.
Paul Begala, I was thinking, yeah.
And he was a movement conservative at that time, establishment conservative, very much button. So he got torn apart when Jon Stewart from The Daily Show went on that show.
Did you watch that again this week?
I did, yeah, just because it's so illustrative. And then Tucker started this basically this movement to reinvent himself, and he's been fired now from all three networks: CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. And he has pivoted, though. His shows on MSNBC and CNN were much more down the line, conservative commentary, news discussion. And, there are some good quotes, which I think we mentioned a while back. You can find him, what he said about Bill O'Reilly back in 2003, where he claimed that he was a demagogue and speaking to the worst common denominator. And he became that. And he intentionally decided to become what he at the time hated because of money and because of what it would bring him. So, again, that's where we are now. I did want to... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, it was such a great example by Jon Stewart of just looking at somebody and saying... You're full of shit. You're full of shit. And everybody knows you're full of shit. And you're full of shit.
Do you know that
you know it?
He even berated him down to the bow tie, which he was known for.
Yeah.
Tucker stopped wearing bow ties after that. Completely reinvented his persona.
It's just there was a time. It reminds me of a time at work when somebody was trying to do something that they know they couldn't do, and they were just doing it because they could. And just the simple, direct approach, just the words over and over again. You can't do that. You know that. You know that.
There's also, I want to back up. I'm going to have to find this term. I read it the other day and I already forgot, but there is a term, as you were talking about this phenomenon that's gained traction among the right. People who talk about everything, regardless of not having knowledge or expertise, but being confident about what they don't know simply because of the fact that they have a platform to talk about it, and the fact that their confidence continues to increase despite their knowledge not being there or decreasing. And again, I'll find that term. There's actually a scientific term for that. It's actually a psychological phenomenon. But we're seeing that played out over and over among all of these people. And you see it in real time, of course, with social media. But
And all of these people have set themselves up as truth tellers. Again, there's a truth.
They're going to reveal to you what the mainstream media is telling you and nobody else is telling you.
Only
you can
I can
only
see
get
it.
it from them.
That's correct.
And why do they do that? Because many Americans gravitate towards this idea that somehow I'm getting exclusive information that you can't get from anywhere else, and I am one of only a select few getting this. So you on the street who's just taking in the mainstream news, you don't know what's going on. I do, and I'm going to teach you and I'm going to set you right, and because I know what's actually going on and you don't. So there is this just almost like an endorphin rush, with the feeling of having this exclusivity when it comes to news and information, where you're part of a select few and not everybody else has that.
And from the host perspective, setting yourself up as that truth teller. I speak truth to power. I am the only person you can trust. Nobody else in the media is telling you the truth. You have to come to me or to this show or participate in what I'm putting out there in order to not be some rube and see the truth of what's actually happening. That was definitely part of Tucker Carlson's appeal.
Yeah. And I'm going to make a comparison because that's actually what cult leaders do as well. People that get just drawn into cults, it's that same mentality. This person has access to exclusive information. You can only get it from them. You have to listen to them and do everything they say because they are this source of truth that can't be found anywhere. So, and we have media movements and phenomenons that border on cult mentality, like QAnon, which is one of those. And so you have to be very careful and mindful of all of that. Before we move on, I do want to highlight, just because I think this nugget was very interesting and it's tabloidy and gossipy, but Rupert Murdoch's fiance, he broke off his engagement with her. One of the reasons it's been thrown out there in the media, which again is not confirmed, but sources have said that she loved Tucker Carlson so much and told Rupert Murdoch that he was a messenger from God.
Yeah, said she honestly believed that.
And Rupert said, and Rupert said nope. And that was kind of like the last straw for, and he apparently broke off the relationship. I don't know if it was only because of that, but apparently that was partially why.
I am not going to make fun of Rupert Murdoch for at 92 wanting to get married again. I'm a big fan of love. Love as many people as you can. Get your heart broke as much as you want. At 92, if you think you're up for the challenge again, go ahead. Have at it. But I do think the story is indicative of maybe he's just looking at the people around him and thinking, what are these people seeing?
What is this monster I created?
I think it could be, what are these people seeing? And then, what have I done?
Yeah.
I mean,
what have I done? Yeah, exactly.
I mean, at his age, and that he's the founder of that company, you can't expect him to be involved in the day-to-days. But he can certainly watch the product that's being produced and have a few questions and say, hey, we're beyond the point where I'm comfortable with what's happening here.
Right, because, I mean, Rupert Murdoch is a money man, but we have heard from him time and time again. Like, he was shocked by January 6th. Like, he was, not a fan of Trump after that. Like, there's a lot of anecdotes that suggest that things go too far for him as well. And even in what has come out through the testimony with the Dominion settlement, he's been very blunt and honest about some of the lies that were told on his own network. So again, I think at the end of the day too, he's perhaps taken a step back and analyzing that.
So let's end Tucker Talk with, where does he go next? He can't go to a network. He's flagged that out.
I did hear that like News Nation was like putting out vibes for him, but they couldn't pay him anywhere near what he was making.
If I'm Tucker, one play, and it all depends on what does the Tucker Carlson revenge tour look like. If he's going after the mothership, Fox News, he could roll to OAN or Newsmax and just say, hey, I'm part owner. I'm bringing a couple billion in investment with me. And my goal is we are going right at Fox News.
Give him some content authority ownership at the network.
Here's why I don't think that will happen. Tucker Carlson is roughly 53, 54. He's basically my age. The woman who is suing him, the producer / booker, whatever she is, she made 90 separate tapes of his conversation. I don't trust any human being anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what the perception is of me. I know people are coming at me. I'm going to make whatever move I make next is going to be very small. And I'm going to have very few people around me because I'm not going through this again.
He has to be paranoid at this point, right?
I would be. I would think that's a natural reaction. When people are recording you at work, I think that would change your psyche about how you approach work.
Right.
So, I mean, he could do that. I think what he'll end up doing is doing a Substack, something like that. He'll join Rumble or Substack or Spotify.
Something smaller in scale.
He'll strike a deal with them for content. He'll do a podcast, a blog, and some 15, 20-minute video stuff. And I think that's what it'll be. And he'll make tens of millions of dollars a year off of it.
Yeah, I could see that. We would be remiss and also just not mentioning also on Monday, Don Lemon was fired from CNN. Not as big of news and obviously not as earth-shattering, but just and not surprising, I would say, because Lemon has been on thin ice for a while, and I think his time was running out.
You can say a lot about Tucker Carlson, but you can't say the man is not talented.
Right.
Especially from where he comes from. He has a unique position, and Tucker Carlson does mean better than any person on the right.
He reinvented himself time and time again, and he's smart at what he does. And I think that would be the challenge, is anybody that replaces him and attempts to do what he did. I don't know that they could do it as well as he did, and do it in a way that still draws people in with the charisma, with the storytelling, with the narrative. Yeah. You have to really bring all of that together. There are other hosts that attempt to do what he does, but they're dumb. They're not as smart. People like Janine Pirro and people like Maria Bartiromo.
This is a
those
great
are not
point.
Smart people.
Look at the group of dum-dums around him trying to be him. And look at the parade of people they're going to put in that seat. It comes nowhere. It comes nowhere close to what he can do. So
right.
I think Tucker will be just fine.
Yeah.
I mean, so Brian Seltzer thinks he could get 500,000 people paying $100 a year on a paid subscription service.
Oh, I think
quickly.
So easily, yeah.
Yeah, and grow from there. So
I mean, that's essentially what Bill O'Reilly did. Is he, has his own newsletter subscription service. He's still around. He kicks out newsletters.
Have you ever consumed any of his content since he left Fox?
I have, just because I have an old throwaway email that I have a lot of that stuff gets dumped into. So I check every once in a while, and it's just
older, whiter, and meaner.
Yeah, that's all it is.
If you want to watch a rich white guys hit what the descent is like as they cross. Bill O'Reilly's got to be over 70 now.
Oh yeah,
as they cross into their elderly years, O'Reilly's just a case study on that.
Exactly.
God, I would say the last thing I'll say is there's Glenn Beck's podcast. I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday. He had Megyn Kelly and Bill O'Reilly on.
Oh, really?
Megyn Kelly made a great point about the producer, about he's mean to his producer as part of that lawsuit. She's like, I can tell you right now, at Fox, there is no penalty for an on-air host belittling, berating, and just abusing producer talent.
So Dan Abrams,
that's just not going to. Yeah,
Dan Abrams had Megyn Kelly on News Nation, which I caught a little bit of the other day, and she said the same thing. Like that would not be out of the ordinary, and Fox would not act solely based on that, unless again there's something deeper there. There's something on a recording we don't know that they've heard that's going to be more liable for them. Glenn
Beck told the story about, hey, if you think you're ever too big for Fox, he went on vacation one time at the height of his show. And they leaked to the media he had been suspended. He's like, it was a vacation.
This has been planned
for over a year. I have the email saying it. And he finally got somebody at Fox to say, it's good for advertisers. Advertisers want to take a chunk out of you. This is how we're going to do it. You just got to live with it. So
that tells you everything you need to know.
DeSantis, he's got himself in trouble with the Mighty Mouse again, it looks like.
Yeah, so, it's interesting. Tucker had a very bad week, but DeSantis didn't really have that much of a better week. He's continuing his very bad moment at the, which seems to now be stretching, into month.
It's going on a lot.
So Disney pushing back against DeSantis. So for those that haven't followed this saga, the board of cronies that DeSantis appointed, who are several of them are batshit crazy, they basically just wrote up a resolution nullifying the contractual agreements that Disney had the prior board pass, which are legally binding before the law changed and DeSantis's appointees were able to take their places. So Disney has sued, and they have filed this lawsuit in federal court. And there's a couple things with the lawsuit. It was striking to me that they did not mince words here. So they filed this lawsuit, by the way, within minutes of DeSantis's board nullifying their contractual agreement. And they claim that this is a targeted campaign of government retaliation. They accused DeSantis of, quote, relentless campaign to weaponize government power against Disney in retaliation for expressing a political viewpoint. They also said that this campaign now threatens Disney's business operations, jeopardizing its economic future in the region and violates its constitutional rights. And Disney's lawsuit said that the board was, quote, patently retaliatory, patently anti-business, and patently unconstitutional.
Yeah, that sounds about true.
So very strong language, but also I think very accurate language. And Disney has a lot on the line here. They're wanting to expand Disney World and pump hundreds of millions in investment into that park and in new operations to expand the footprint there. And so they're claiming that this jeopardizes that. And I also saw this. I wanted to take a step back. And this is why this is all incredibly stupid, because at the end of the day, if Disney did decide to pick up and leave, which, by the way, it was kind of funny to see like Nikki Haley tweet out, Disney, come to South Carolina.
Yeah. We're woke, but we're not sanctimonious.
We're not sanctimonious about it. So, which again is kind of like a nod to Trump,
Good job,
right?
Nikki. Yeah.
Ron DeSanctimonious. Yeah. So Disney, though, paid and collected $1.2 billion in state and local taxes in 2022 alone. $1.2 billion in state taxes. Like, if that went away tomorrow, how would the Florida state government continue functioning without $1.2 billion?
They wouldn't.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing. Like, again, they're poking this mammoth economic behemoth that drives their state's economy. And again, Orlando would be a hole in the ground if it wasn't for Disney. Like, it would cease to even be in the imagination.
Brandon, I have been told reliably that Ron DeSantis is a fighter. And if your reputation is a fighter, you have to fight. Fighters don't negotiate. Fighters don't lay their arms down and say, maybe there's a better way to do this. If I'm a fighter and that's what I want to be known as, well, then I always have to be in a fight. And I think that's where DeSantis is finding the flaw in his branding.
Well, yeah, he's finding it's not working. And it's incredible to me because he's getting pushed back in a lot of different areas. I've read a couple things that even Florida lawmakers are grumbling that they're starting to get exhausted with his battle with Disney, and that they are indicating that they're not going to be likely to continue it. Like they're kind of at the end of supporting him on the legislative front. So that's not good. He lost all of these potential legislative endorsements to Trump from Florida as well. But and then Trump himself put out a post, whatever they're called, basically blasting DeSantis for, poking Disney and the economic impact, which actually out of everything Trump has ever tweeted, that was the most logical and rational response to what DeSantis is doing. So it's interesting. He's getting hit at from all sides. And again, there's this idea that somehow DeSantis is just has aptitude and would be able to debate well. I haven't seen any indication of that. He doesn't handle the press well. He doesn't seem to argue his own position very well. He was asked about this lawsuit that Disney filed, and he made some kind of statement saying, it's just political. That's all it is. It's political. That was his only response. It's really first of all, your action was political and going after them. You started this, and they're actually filing a lawsuit related to the nullification of their contractual agreement. How is that political? There's a legally binding contract at the heart of their lawsuit. So it's not just political, obviously, because they want to be able to run their operations as they did prior to all of this happening. So I thought that was a very weak response to all of that, let alone that he continues to, make this claim that, we're not going to allow any corporation to be its own government. Well, if that was the case, are you going to nullify these types of agreements that are in place throughout the state? There's 300 some agreements like that. It's give me a break.
What I don't understand here. So if I'm Ron DeSantis, number one, what is making the calculation that you can make political gain off Disney's back is just not a good calculation to make. Yeah. You just ran through the numbers of what they mean to the state of Florida. So if you want to pick what now has turned into an elongated fight over a culture war that's now spilled over into the political arena, the local arena, the legal arena, I would think you would have, what is your objective coming out of this if you wanted to go that big? What I would thought a governor would do is call whoever's contact is at Disney and say, hey, listen, Bob, you're going to hear some shit come out of my mouth and we're going to do some stuff, but don't worry about it. This is just politics. I'm going to bang on you for a little bit to make some culture war hay, and then I'm going to move on. And I think that's what most of us thought this was going to be, because, again, there is no political positive outcome of getting into this big of a fight with Disney.
No.
Sununu, Haley, Trump, I think everybody who's could be associated with Chris Christie, all of them have said, this is dumb, this is not conservative.
Oh, yeah, they've all piled on.
It's time to bail out of this.
Yeah.
Did you see him in Israel this week where he just went snappy at a reporter who asked him about Disney?
I heard about that. What did he actually say to the reporter?
He just kept going on. So what he did was he didn't like the question, so he immediately turned it personal on the reporter. You're a hack for asking that. That's your woke agenda. This tells me more about who you are than about anything because you asked it. That's a very good tactic to use, but it also comes across as mean, aggressive, and kind of unlikable. Yeah. These are typically things that you want to avoid if you're running to be the president of the United States.
Agreed. Yeah, but and I think it's emblematic of the fact that he's lived in this media silo for so long. He's coddled in Florida. He basically has created this environment where the press is afraid to ask him questions because they're afraid of the political retaliation and consequences of doing so, because he started out like that in Florida, hitting back and being very aggressive and punishing, press that asked him tough questions, restricting access.
Yeah.
And so they don't do that in Florida. He hasn't been outside of that bubble. He hasn't faced tough questions. And his immediate instinct is to become hyper defensive and to hit back. And it's not a good look. And it's not one that's going to serve him well on a national campaign where he's going to have to take tough questions from local news affiliates in Iowa and South Carolina, on the campaign trail from all manner of media across the spectrum. And so if he can't handle this, I mean, it, first of all, tells me that he's very thin-skinned. And that, again, you can't run a campaign for president with that mentality. It's not going to work.
And I think we'd heard about this, but now we're kind of seeing this come to light. He hasn't announced yet. I think the Florida legislation, they did whatever he asked them to do to make it where he doesn't have to resign the governorship to run. So I think that's out of the way.
Next week?
I believe. I thought, well, maybe it's on the floor now, but they'll pass it sometime soon.
Yeah.
And then the legislation session in Florida ends, I think, mid-May. Biden's in, so I'm assuming in mid-May, as soon as that session's over, he'll officially announce for the president. He currently sits, I think the last poll I saw, he was down by 42 points to Trump nationally.
Yeah, it was pretty embarrassing.
Trump is calling for a call off of the debates, as again, there's no reason for them, which he may have a point. I guess one of the things we probably need to talk through, I'm pretty sure DeSantis is still going to run. Why? I guess now is the question. What is it about Ron DeSantis now? I mean, we ask this question all the time, and Ron has been unable to answer it. Why is it urgent and important that Ron DeSantis is the next president? And more importantly, do you feel comfortable handing him the reins of federal government power, seeing what he's done in Florida?
I mean, the way he
Absolutely
punishes business
not.
and his enemies. But yeah, what is the case? I mean, he can't really make that case. He's been too timid and afraid to go after Trump. So he won't even criticize areas where he thinks Trump is wrong. He just says he'll be more effective at governing than Trump, which is a very kind of on the margins type of argument to make, a very kind of nuanced. It's more process oriented, not policy. So it's hard to make the case that this time has come for you to be president when you're not willing to make that case yourself, because at the end of the day, you won't criticize your greatest opponent.
That's a great point. How could you be president when you won't even criticize that person? When you completely kowtow to that person?
Right.
Is Trump right? As a Republican, should they just kill off the Republican primary?
Well, I mean, no, they shouldn't.
The look of just disgust on your face, because there's like that second when you realize that could actually happen.
I mean, it could. I think, the RNC, you have Romney McDaniel, who's still in charge and who was in Trump's pocket. It could actually happen. It shouldn't, because we should have a legitimate debate and give equal time to all of the candidates. But at the end of the day, too, we see the polls and we know who's riding high and who isn't. The fact that we don't see a lot changing in this race. And granted, it's still early enough where we could see things get shake up, and we could see a dark horse emerge. We could see something else happen. But I do think, regardless, I don't see Ron DeSantis being the knight in shining armor, the savior. If it is, it's going to be somebody else who would be the alternative to Trump. And there is nobody now, but I don't think it's going to be Ron DeSantis.
Chris Sununu, Asa Hutchinson, Nikki Haley,
Chris Christie.
None of them are. They could be entertaining, but there's none of them ever going to take a shot at him.
Asa Hutchinson was on Axelrod's podcast. Did you?
I've heard some clips where he will go at Trump directly.
He will, and it was actually so I like him a lot just because he's the closest thing to a normie, and he did not he did not give in and yield and go MAGA at all, to try to get, like Nikki Haley and the rest of them done at different times. But again, there's no lane for him. What
party is he running for?
Yeah, first of all, he's very smart. He's very deliberate. He thinks about what he's going to say. Approach to politics. He's very nuanced on some of these issues. That's not what the base wants.
Nobody's calling for that.
And again, the greatest example is he was followed in office as governor of Arkansas by Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who could not be more different than his approach. Very different people in the party.
God,
he's like the Mitt Romney to her Trump, essentially.
But there is no call for a Mitt Romney.
There is no call.
There is no who is saying, "Wow, we really got to get back to normal here." Nobody. I mean, as far as I can understand, the Republican Party right now is looking for somebody that's going to embrace actual radical change.
Yeah.
And Trump's biggest running point is, I didn't get to finish the job because the deep state stopped me. Now I know more about it. I'm going to go in there and just blow everything up and do everything I've told you I'm going to do. And I don't see who's going to stop him. I guess we've come to this point where, have the Republicans realized you will be done with Trump when Trump is done with you. And he's not done with you yet. And whatever he's going to do in this election, whatever, he's going to keep his jaws on you until he can wring out anything of value to him. You might want to walk away from him. There's no walking away from him at this point.
No, he doesn't allow that.
He is the party.
He's still kingmaker
until he's done.
Well, and again, Republicans, elected on Capitol Hill, and the donors and the lobbyists, their one hope, because again, they see no way out of this, is they are literally waiting for Trump to die. They see that as
I think
the
that's
only
the
way
strategy.
to get out of this.
Charlie Sykes openly talks about it. The only way out of this is Trump's death. And people will talk about that in D.C. I've come around to Jonah Goldberg's position of, we need to get rid of all primaries. This all needs to go back to a party smoke-filled room, and they make all of these decisions. What has the primary system got us?
Yeah.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Donald Trump to a certain extent. I don't think the system that we're using now for elections and primaries is getting anybody the results they thought they were going to get.
I don't think so either. But again, I don't think that's going to happen tomorrow. That's why I'm saying we need to start with state-by-state reforms in terms of nonpartisan blanket primaries, allowing the first top 5 to then advance to runoff, those types of reforms to be able to, in a piecemeal, incremental fashion, move towards more moderate candidates. And I think that's how we start, and that's how we get there. And in states like Arkansas, where and Oklahoma and other very deep red states where ranked choice voting isn't likely because it's too complex and it's too difficult to understand. It can easily be spun as a liberal thing. You start with nonpartisan blanket primaries or something like that, and that's where you can move the needle. And I know there's groups on the ground working to get a ballot referendum in Arkansas for that, but that's really where it's going to have to go. And it's a state-by-state effort. We're a federal system, so we can't just pass something nationwide. And so we're going to have a patchwork of different elections.
But maybe at the Senate level, maybe at the statewide election level and the federal level, I mean, in 5 to 10 years, parties will be done, right? Because what do I need a party for? I don't need your money. I can directly fundraise. Trump has shown that is for any amount of money that what I want. You're not going to block me. You're not a barrier to entry. You're going to say, no, I can't. Because you don't seem, I say you, but parties seem to not care who runs under their brand and what damage they do.
No, I think the future of parties is in doubt overall.
What does the party do anymore?
Well, and I think, again, George Washington and John Adams were both, warned us about political parties
Didn't
and
like 'em.
the downfall of the republic, and I think they were right. Yeah.
I mean, if you're telling me who do you trust, the Republican Party in a smoke-filled room or the voters of some place in Georgia that elected Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'll take the dudes in the back room. Yeah, I get it. Probably not going to get the most diverse candidate set. That's going to take a hit. But at the same time, look at what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, agreed. I mean, we need to go back to that. I mean, we had stability for how many years? Because that was the
lot.
Yeah. The primary system and the way it's set up now, and especially with Republicans trying to make it more difficult to vote and more restrictive, it's not the answer. Do we even want to talk about the debt ceiling crisis?
I think we got to, because I was shocked that the Republicans got their shit together enough to pass that bill that they passed.
Barely. Was it by 2 votes?
It was by 2 votes. It's a complete non-starter. Strips money out of the Veterans Administration and all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah, it's not going to.
It's going nowhere in the Senate. And again, Biden can always fall back to, this is not a budget discussion.
Right.
This is an artificial political fight we created around the debt ceiling, which is stupid.
And you didn't do this under Trump.
No.
You didn't make these demands because you recognize that this should not. And no other country ties debt ceiling increases to their annual budget. It's not.
Did this come about in the Obama days?
Originally, yeah. If you remember, 2014 was when this first happened with House Republicans, and there was the brinkmanship.
Yeah,
and that's when the government did shut down. I think for like 3 days.
I do remember that.
Time. National parks closed, and then they worked out. I don't even remember now what the compromise was, but then it happened again, at least one other time after that. I think, right? Maybe twice.
I think the government shutdown has happened, I believe, twice.
Okay, that is, but we've had the brinkmanship happen over and over again. Maybe that's where I get confused now, because that's become
it's always
perennial
a fight
thing.
Well,
but it used to always.
I'll rephrase: when a Democrat's in office, it's a fight.
Yeah,
it never happens under Republican.
Right, when Trump and Republicans have full control, it wasn't.
So does McCarthy have any legs to stand on in forcing Biden to negotiate with him, or is Biden right to say, listen, this is all just made up bullshit, I'm not going to participate, pass it, or the problem's yours?
I think Biden should call his bluff, which is essentially what Obama did with John Boehner and House Republicans when and John Boehner is held hostage to the crazies like McCarthy is.
Yeah.
But yeah, call his bluff, because they don't have anything at the end of the day. And McCarthy's the one in the tenuous position because he can't afford to lose a single vote. And he doesn't really have any feasible options. That's why this bill is so crazy.
Yeah.
Like, this barely could muster, but it's not feasible. And Republicans are unwilling to cut Social Security or any of the entitlements or the military, any of the big things that are really what accounts for the majority of the budget.
This has money out of veteran stuff and border stuff.
Yeah,
and how can they move forward with that?
Well, and not just veterans, but the 9/11 first responders fund. Jon Stewart fought to get those benefits extended, and those are cut from this legislation, which is just awful.
This just feels like another political miscalculation by the Republicans. This is going to come back to bite them in the ass, and at the end of the day, they're going to fold.
Yeah.
And if I'm Biden, I'll say, listen, here's what I'll do. I'll make the concession to where any of the pandemic money that hasn't been spent, we'll claw that back. I think that's reasonable, and we'll do that. But other than that, I'm just not. We're not doing this. I would agree. I think
that's one concession that can be made, but none of the others should be made, because all of the others reflect the agenda that he was voted in to do, and that Democrats were voted in to do, and it's completely irrational to expect them to cut any of that or claw that back.
I would say, listen, I'll throw you a bone. I made a compromise. Here's this one thing, maybe something small, but it gives you a win, and let's move forward. There's no possible way that's how this is going to work.
I mean, if I was the White House, I would have somebody in there, a liaison, undercutting Boehner by talking to the handful of any moderate Republicans who would be, saying, what can we work out with you, some type of deal. The people like Nancy Mace from South Carolina, Don Bacon from Nebraska, those people, to just ensure that there is momentum for something, because if you can basically say, hey, here's this plan that you have all these Democrats for and a handful of Republicans, bipartisan, you could undercut McCarthy there. And then, he basically would be in prime position to negotiate, because he would have anything at that point.
Well, and I think McCarthy in some ways has already tipped his hand when he went to Wall Street and talked to those folks.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm sure the message to them was, hey, this ain't happening, guys. Don't worry. Don't tank the stock market on this. We're not that stupid. This will get resolved.
That's exactly what he was doing.
I mean, he wasn't there talking about government funding cuts, because they could give two shits.
Right.
It's, are you going to shut it down and cause me a problem or not? So I think this feels like another artificial fight that there'll be some political hay made about. But in the end, it feels like everybody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that is the case. And again, we'll see if voters hold Republicans responsible for
they typically do.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, this will be another campaign issue, and I think it's going to be, especially in marginal seats, it'll be tough. And
2 more states ratified abortion this week, didn't they? Nebraska.
Well, no. So
what happened on
Nebraska
that front?
and South Carolina failed to pass more restrictive abortion regulations. Gotcha. So yeah, that happened this week, which is interesting. So no bills are going to be going to the governor to sign. What's interesting is 2 conservative states. I'm sure they would have thought once Roe versus Wade fell, the state would immediately pass a law to restrict abortion.
And it's just
Well, in
no
both of
state. This is not happening.
No, and in both of these cases, the bills were shy of a couple of Republican votes. A few Republicans in South Carolina and in the Nebraska legislature that were unwilling to go that far. They said, "No, this is a bridge too far. We're not going to do that."
Have you been following what's happening to the trans legislator in Montana?
Oh yeah, so the cutting her. It's interesting.
Did you see where she set her desk up outside the thing?
No, I didn't see that.
They didn't kick her out. I think they censured her, and part of the censure is she cannot speak on the floor for the entire session. Well, so she just moved her desk outside to do it out there.
So the reason this is like so ridiculous too is it's all because of the comment she made, which they found so offensive, was that she basically said they all had blood on their hands. And so apparently that was egregious enough to where they went to basically say she cannot speak during the entire rest of the session. And it's like, really, that's going to be the line? Like, you see all of the crazy incendiary rhetoric we've seen in the Trump era, and that's what gets you in trouble. And you would think they'd be a little bit more mindful of optics in the wake of what happened in Tennessee with those three lawmakers.
So I want to push on that for a second. So if I have my history right, you were once involved and maybe even led the Kansas Young Republicans.
I did. I was chair of the Kansas Young Republicans.
So is there anybody in what I'm going to call the national party, I don't know the nomenclature here, but in the Republican national level that actually talks to, cares about, and listens to anybody under the age of 70 in the Republican Party?
So in Young Republicans, we did have liaisons at the national level. Like there was an RNC outreach position, a chair for young people, and there were a handful of electeds. But the way that the Young Republicans were organized, there was a Young Republican National Federation, like national board, and then there were state federations and then local chapters. So it was very much that kind of hierarchy. And again, there were liaisons, but there wasn't like a direct link to like the RNC or the state party.
Would it be accurate to say you guys didn't really have a seat at the table?
No, I mean, there were times that they would invite us to the table if they were doing a survey or if they were doing some kind of specific get out the vote project, but a permanent seat at the table, no, like that was not it just didn't exist.
Do you think the Republican Party at the national level understands the damage it's doing to itself with younger voters? Do you think they have a sense of everything that's happening, how that picture looks to a young person in America
I think
today?
they do, but I think that they either don't know what to do about it or more likely are just unwilling to take the steps they need to do to confront it, because
is that a power thing? Is that a money thing?
I mean, it puts them in conflict with their base. I mean, they see the numbers in terms of like Wisconsin, that state Supreme Court election, like, I mean, the surge in youth turnout throughout the state, especially in Madison. And a lot of these like by-elections, like the youth turnout has just been off the charts, and it continues to go more and more against Republicans. They understand that's a problem. That's the reason why, oh gosh, what's her name? There's that conservative lawyer, Cleta Mitchell, who's been was working on with a bill in Montana, I think, to basically restrict polling places like at college campuses.
Yeah, that's going to be a biggie.
That's part of the pushback now, is to try to prevent young people from voting, like moving polling places off of college campuses, making it harder to vote, restricting IDs. A lot of these states for years have allowed college students to use their university and campus IDs.
It's a state-issued ID.
And now they're saying, no, you have to actually have a driver's license, not a state-issued ID.
Which is going to cut people out.
So again, they recognize the problem, right? Because they wouldn't be taking those steps to restrict the vote and to disenfranchise college voters if they didn't recognize them, because they see that as the only alternative. That is not a long-term strategy. That is not going to be successful. So it's hard. I'm trying to put myself in there. I can't fully understand.
When you were involved with the Republican Party at that level, did you ever see a plan of how to engage with young people? Was there ever...
Yeah.
That was part of the strategy?
I mean, I saw quite a few plans on how to engage with young people, and many of those plans
were any of them good?
I mean, there were a few good ones talking about like focus on entrepreneurship and being able to, increase that, increasing different avenues for job opportunities and getting into the trades for young people. There was a lot, well, this is way back because this is clearly no longer part of the effort, but looking at, changing, reforming the visa system to bring in high-skilled immigrants.
Okay.
For startups. So there was a lot along those lines as well. One of the plans I saw even talked about moderating the party's message on marijuana legalization. But I feel like none of those plans, like those have all been discarded at this point. Like that's not
part of the platform now.
That's all part of the old party. I mean, those are in line with like the 2012 post-presidential election, post-mortem, diagnosis of what the, party needed to do to reform. And, it was similar to that, and that's been discarded, right? I mean, so I can point to several things that were good, which if they had kept on track with those, like we might be in a different place, but they haven't. I mean, they've completely gone 180 from those.
So David Frum wrote an article called the impending Joe Biden wipeout, where he wipes out the Republicans.
I've heard about it. I haven't read it.
I didn't read it because it's in the Atlantic behind the paywall. But if I were kind of building if I were going to write that article and that was the title, my first point I think would be there's absolutely no way turnout in 2024 matches anywhere close to 2020. I think 67% of eligible voters voted. There's no possible way that happens again.
You don't think that'll happen again?
No.
Even if Trump's on the ballot?
I think if Trump's on the ballot.
I think if Trump was on the ballot.
Trump's not Trump anymore.
Well, no, but I think Trump still has the ability to energize the left, and get the left out to vote, which and that's why if he's not on the ballot, I do think those dynamics change as far as turnout on the.
What does a Trump on the ballot look like under 3 separate indictments, and having been found guilty civilly in the sexual assault case of E. Jean Carroll, which is probably going to happen.
Right.
I mean, he is not going to be the same. I don't think his base will vote for him. I think Republican voting is going to be extremely depressed by the presence of Trump.
Okay.
So if I'm writing the article, how Joe Biden blows out and wins re-election, part of my thesis is Trump is so damaged at this point, Republican vote is going to be very suppressed. He's going to get his 28% of whatever he has, but outside of that, it's going to fall off a cliff. There's going to be a ton of Republicans that do not vote for president.
And I'm just saying that the left will still be energized to get out as long as Trump's on the ballot.
Then if you take that as the left energized, I think that could be a premise to where the Democrats blow the Republicans out in 2024.
I don't think it was Frum, but another author basically said Biden for the next 2 years needs to live in Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan.
There's only about 12 counties he needs to visit.
Yeah. I mean, really like 5 states only that are going to, that were decided the outcome among 100,000 votes.
I mean, what's it going to be? Arizona, Wisconsin, Georgia?
Georgia, yep.
Pennsylvania? I mean, I think Pennsylvania is pretty solidly blue if Trump runs.
Yeah.
Ohio is pretty solidly
Michigan
red.
is pretty solidly blue.
I think Michigan's going to be pretty solid.
So yeah, maybe it's really just Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia.
Colorado's blue. Nevada's turning blue. I don't think it's that. It'll be interesting to see is Georgia going to continue the march towards becoming
Georgia
more
and Arizona
purple?
were the two that those are in question, right? So that's why these the 2022 congressional elections were interesting because both of those states had 2 senators up for re-election that had been elected back in 2020 to fill partial terms, and both won re-election very convincingly. So, we'll see how those go. But both of those states don't seem to be reverting red.
They don't.
They seem to be just acclimating to this new status of either purple or light blue.
And Trump gives them no reason to revert.
Oh, yeah, not at all.
There's nothing new and exciting that suddenly is going to spawn more red activity in those states. No. Did you go to the draft last night at all?
I did not. I heard a lot about it. You went, though. How was it?
We went, but we went in the afternoon. We did how typical we are starting to do things now on an old person's schedule. So when we go
avoid the crowds, get it there early.
Absolutely. So on a major event like that, I think there were about 150,000 people there last night. Wow. So Joe and I, we went there at noon and we were done by 4:30. We went down and ate and walked around. What I really loved about it is how beautiful the city came off on TV. How the stage was lit up and the fountains.
It looked amazing from everything I saw on television.
Cosmetically, it looked very, very good, and it looked like just a first class setup all the way around. So it was a pretty fun event.
So you could stay there pretty late, right? I know there were people that stayed very late.
Not only did I think the draft shit probably didn't get over till 10:30 or 11, there was a concert there last night.
Okay, that's why, because people were there till after midnight. I mean, it was...
Brandon, there's a concert there today, after the draft today.
That's right.
Would you guess who it is?
Gosh, I feel like I heard...
80s, metal, into the 90s.
Okay.
Motley Crue.
Motley Crue, wow.
Can
That's a
you
big name.
picture the crowd for Motley Crue? Because this is going to be after 2 rounds of drafting, so they won't hit the stage until 11, I'm guessing.
They'll be late, yeah.
So by that time, that crowd's going to be drunk and just ready to go.
Oh my gosh, that's going to be...
And most people there are probably going to be closer to my age. These are going to be hardcore Motley Crue fans.
Yeah.
It's going to be quite a time.
No, this has been fantastic, though, for our city, and it's been amazing to watch. And again, it feels like Kansas City is entering into this new phase in terms of spotlight. I mean, we have the World Cup coming.
Yeah.
Like, we're on this roll. I mean, really.
For a city our size, the last 5 years, we've been able to pull some pretty good stuff.
Yeah. And I feel like the timing is great, right? For all of this. The new airport just opened.
Yep.
Perfect timing for the draft. Everybody comes in, like, great front door to Kansas City. Like, I mean, we have pulled off some really great things, and I hope it leads to us getting more events. I mean, it's
Brendan,
really nice.
you have traveled extensively, so you would be able to answer this question for me. Is the KC airport too small?
I mean, as it is now with the new, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to... I mean, I think it could be larger comparatively to other cities, but at the same time, I think that the size has always been justified because we've always had somewhat smaller footprint.
Sure.
You know? So we don't bring in the big events that bring in the, large numbers of people, a volume of people that...
I guess I never realized because it was spread across 3 terminals that when you condense it all down to one,
it is,
that airport's actually smaller than I thought it would be.
It is. I mean, it is fairly small. I would like to see an increase from the perspective of getting more domestic flights as well as getting more international flights. When I say more, because we have very few right now, and there's been all this talk of like, what if we got like a Lufthansa flight to to Berlin or something, or London, or it would be great to get direct flights, at least 1 or 2.
So you want more business flights like to Europe and stuff?
Yes.
That would be nice.
Direct flights would be nice
because I think they've added some to Cancun and some places
they
more
have,
vacation-y, but not from a business.
Not from a business standpoint, and I think that's really kind of what sets us apart. Because even like St. Louis, like they have a couple of direct flights, I think, to Germany and London.
Blows. That's one of the worst airports.
I'm not crazy about their airport, but they do have more of that, the international and the business, which if we could get just a little bit of that would be nice. And
we were able to get tickets, another couple of, Joe and I, another couple, we got tickets to U2 in Vegas at that new Sphere on October 28th.
Oh my gosh. Wait, is that already open, the Sphere, or not?
I think it opens September 20-something.
I can't wait to see that.
Is the first band to play. They're going to play like 8 or 9 shows there.
Oh, that's going to be awesome.
And in Taylor Swift, it was a Taylor Swift type auction thing. A buddy of mine went on, he got a code. He's like, they've already sent me an email saying like 2 million people have applied for this. So don't get your hopes up. But he got selected. We got a code. It was only $286 for 2 tickets.
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, we're up high, but from what I understand, this thing is just a big, giant, round LED screen. So that should be pretty
like
cool.
all the way around. And apparently
inside and out.
Yeah, I mean, the technology is supposed to be like out of this world. I can't wait to
So that's pretty fun.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, well, I'll be able to give a good report to what that is, but I would think seeing any band there would be pretty good.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm excited because, I mean, they've been working on that for a while. I'm in Vegas.
This thing is huge, too.
I do want to step back to the one big complaint I still have about the airport. I picked somebody up Monday night, and a lot of people were getting in Monday night. So there is still so many people that don't understand that in the pickup zone, people that are parking, and it's creating these lines that back up all the way to Paris Street. And so you're talking about, several blocks away, and it's basically bumper to bumper, not moving. And so it took me like 20 minutes just to actually get to the loading zone because of this. And they had traffic control there, and the people that were moving in the outer lanes, they were motioning that, but they were not actually going up to doors and knocking and telling people you need to move. There were people that were literally parking and seated there for like 10, 15 minutes or more. Like, you can't do that. And I do not understand why people continue to do that here when that's not the way any other airport operates.
Thank you. This is what drives me insane about Kansas City. We're going through a change, but we're really not. You know what we're changing to with the airport? It works like every
other airport. Have these people not flown to any other airport? Because they know how it works.
I want to. It's just because again, if anybody's never flown into the old MCI, you can sit in there and park there all day, right by the exit, because it was this weird 3-terminal setup. Now it just works like every other airport, and we just seem to be completely flummoxed by it.
Right. And it's like people don't know how to handle it. It's like, come on, people. No, like
we deal with change slowly here.
I want them to get more aggressive. I want them to knock on doors. I want them to yell at people and tell them to move. Because guess what? I have been at other airports, and I'm thinking West Coast and East Coast, where they don't mess around with that. They will yell at you. They'll ticket you. They'll force you to move.
You ever been at Midway? Where a cop comes up and takes his nightstick out and taps it on your door?
Yes, I've seen that happen. Yeah. We need to have that happen. Like, no more Midwestern nice. Like,
I agree.
Get on these people because it's not sustainable. Like, you should not have to be backed up in a single file line of cars waiting 20 minutes to get to the loading zone.
Let's end on the fact that the Midwest, we can be rude and nasty when we want to be.
We can, yes,
and
we can.
This is an area with those folks. Somebody needs to get nasty with them. Well, that's our hour. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.